It's done.
Connor McDavid! It's not real!
The goal of the year?
Panarin!
Part of the past. The celebrations? Forgotten. The history?
Vegas Golden Knights!
History. We're back to a blank slate. Clean ice. All that matters now is what happens next. The Stanley Cup playoffs.
Eastern Conference Final begins Wednesday.
Serie Chronicles is a Bayer Chronicles production.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Serie Chronicles podcast. I'm Mina Rizuki, and as always, I will be joined by Nikki Bandini and Patrick Kendrick. But this is going to be a very feisty one, guys. But before we get into it, I just want to remind you to subscribe to the Serie Chronicles YouTube channel and watch our clips and shorts. And don't forget our special offer with Manscaped. Get 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com with the code Serie at the checkout. Hello to Nikki and Patrick. Now, I've told you guys before, this is going to be a feisty one. I mean, we've already argued off air about what we should talk about and how we should structure this and what it all means. Okay. So, we're three people who are never shy of telling people, let's say, what we think. But we're going to start at the top with Juventus, because as we all know, Allegri has been sacked. There was a dramatic match against Bologna to see who would potentially finish in third place. There's also Atalanta to look at it. It was a fascinating game in which Bologna went 3-0 up, and then Juventus managed to score 3 goals in 8 minutes. But we haven't come to you with really a debate on what happened with Allegri, with the sacking. Let's say we have differing views on how important this is. I'll go to you, Patrick. How is everyone actually? All good?
Lovely, yeah. A little bit calmer than Allegri, I think, at this moment in time.
So Patrick said something along the lines of, he took off his jacket, Allegri, at the end of the final. And he was just a little bit done with his whole shtick. It's been an overused type of way of sort of provoking something, emotion, pride from his players. I personally said that I absolutely loved it, but I'm the resident Juventino, right? I mean, I thought when he did that whole striptease, it was like a symphony. It was like how can I go and find this man? I think also you have to understand if from a journalistic point of view, or if I look at this as a professional, then totally unprofessional. This is not what Juventus stand for. More importantly, this isn't what Allegri used to stand for, right? Allegri, the one thing about him was that he was a breath of fresh air after Antonio Conte, in the sense that he wasn't somebody who complained so much about the referees. He was just a company man. He seemed very calm, and Carlos Tevez continued to talk about, at the time, his empathy in the dressing room. And then he's slowly gone mad. And obviously the job has had an effect of it as well. But I think as a Juventus fan, having watched what Juve have gone through the last 2 seasons and feeling there hasn't been this strong management, there hasn't been a way of protecting this club, that the one man who has sort of stood as a pillar and represented us, if you like, the anger of Juventus fans, has indeed been Max Allegri. So someone who is so deeply hated by a lot of the fans, he ended up being actually quite loved after all of that, after all the antics. There's a lot who've come out to be like, well, thank you for defending us. Thank you for screaming Dove Rocchi, which was hilarious. But I feel like we might all disagree on this.
Yes. I think we might disagree.
Nikki just so enjoys the controversy. She's just so here for it.
I've got my tea. I need some popcorn. to go with my tea.
She's like, fight! Where's the man?
I feel like I've got carte blanche here, because I'm not sure there was necessarily a question in all that. But what I would say is, I felt for Max Allegri. I think it was him laid bare, literally. Stripping off. I think the only thing missing was the sort of loudspeakers at the Stadio Olimpico playing "You Can Keep Your Head On." I think that would have been perfect. But unfortunately, he's not done it. It's not the first time he's done it. He's a repeat offender with this. I suppose the best thing would have been to have actually kept a list down the years. You'd almost need the person who works on the archives at Juventus to be able to tell you which matches he has removed various items of clothing. But it seems to be various degrees of anger. It starts with his jacket, and this was the first time I think he'd gone beyond the tie. So the shirt started to come off as well. And I feel for him because, as you said, I mean, first of all, I think he's well in his 50s, isn't he? He's very lean for his age. I think we should also give him that. Yes, he's a former professional athlete, but I think he always looks the part in his suit. Anyway,
I don't know if that's being lean or whether that's just like anger has eaten him up at this point. And then he's an actual professional athlete. But yes, go on. Sorry.
But I think he hasn't had any protection. He hasn't been given any assurances over his future. He's insinuated throughout the spring that, you know, he'll be getting things off his chest at the end of the season, that the club and he will decide what the best is for the club's future. Do you know what I mean? And Pioli's done something similar at Milan. It's constantly a case of, I'm not what's important. The club will tell me in due time what the club's plans are, which is just basically, in other words, him saying, I won't be at the club. I can't reveal it at this stage. And so I think it was just vindication for him. It's just been, he's been constantly undermined by the media. The club have never come out and protected him. It's not been a particularly easy job. He's made a rod for his own back with the overwhelming success he had in his first spell, with 5 league titles, 4 of those League and Cup doubles, plus 2 Champions League finals. And Juventus aren't that dominant force anymore. This is always going to be transition. And I actually respect Allegri for having the courage to step back in and going there for a second stint. And I think we've been critical about him here as well. The football has not been champagne football. Then again, when is it with Juventus? That would be my point.
Thank you.
It's not been champagne football. It's been rubbish football. I'm sorry.
No, for sure. Okay. But ultimately, all that matters in that club is winning. And by the same token that you can't win the league every single year, and I think, again, Juventus winning 9 in a row skewed people's expectations.
Exactly.
If you're not going to win the league and you're not playing in Europe, all you can win is the Coppa Italia. And he won the Coppa Italia. And he got them into the Champions League. And he would argue that whether you come second, as also Rans like Milan have, or you come 5th, like Atalanta might end up finishing, getting in the Champions League, ultimately you've qualified for the Champions League the following season. And so you may as well win a trophy. And Atalanta had no chance of winning that cup final at all. It was one of the most one-sided cup finals I've seen. It was very similar to what we saw in 2019 between Atalanta and Lazio. And in 2021 when Atalanta...
Okay, Patrick...
No, I'm just saying, I think he's been really shabbily treated. And my final word on this, because I know I need to give Nicky the floor, even though I'd love to just go on a 20-minute monologue about it. I think he's been really shabbily treated because Juventus have basically done what Lecce did with Roberto D'Aversa. But there's a big difference between headbutting a player and taking off your jacket. Okay, there are...
No, Patrick, wait, it's not about that. It's not about taking off your jacket, though. It's also about the Tutto Sport thing, right? With Guido Vicaggio.
It's about lots of things. It's
about going out and threatening. It's mostly about that, to be honest with you.
Listen,
and then telling Giuntoli, you know, go away. Which, by the way, I loved. But it was also not allowing any of the Giuntoli to come and celebrate with the team.
Yeah, no,
it seemed like he just lost the plot. And while I will, as a fan of Juventus, be in awe of it, as a professional, can absolutely understand that is not the right behavior.
Shall I just go?
Yes.
Please.
No, Nikki. Now it's you. It's all you, Nick.
I thought you meant go as in start speaking. Sorry, I wasn't saying please go.
I was waiting.
Get out.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right. I'm going to get my popcorn. I was so tickled by Patrick saying about getting things off his chest, because that shirt very nearly literally came off his chest. I mean, he has thrown that jacket plenty, but that shirt, I mean, you can see on the pictures, we're a long way undone. And to be fair, maybe this isn't the reason, but like, there are quite a few jobs where if you started getting naked in the middle of the workday, you might be at risk of losing your job. So my feelings on that, I think,
depends on how sexy you are. I'm not going to lie. If it was a woman coach, I feel like everyone would be so on board. You know?
No, I think that would still be super unprofessional. But I have to pull up on this. First things first. Yes, the cup final, Juventus were very good. Very, very good. Atalanta didn't have a sniff. Like, They went behind. That was the end of the game. It was really impressive. But if we're going to talk about this concept that we always have to come back to with Juventus, and I saw Maurizio Sarri having a couple of little digs about it the other day. But if we're going to come back to this concept of at Juventus, winning's the only thing that matters. Okay, he won the cup, and that is important. Winning a trophy is important. He also has won 4 of his last 19 games in charge, I think. Or maybe it's 18, because I think I've just counted the Bologna game, which of course he wasn't in charge for. 4 of the last 18. So if winning is the only thing that matters, Juventus haven't done a lot of that at all since January. They really haven't. It's been dreadful. I think pretending that it hasn't been dreadful because they won a cup is ridiculous. He was always going at the end of this season. I do understand as a personal thing, I understand him feeling all this tension, getting that win in the cup final, and feeling some sort of, I don't know, rage that you need to get out of yourself. I get that. I also think that from the club's point of view, they might have shot themselves in the foot, because I think he probably can make some successful complaint about his dismissal now, because have they really got the correct standing legally for a premature dismissal? I don't know. I think he'll probably have a decent chance of kicking up a stink about that.
Support for Serie A Chronicles is brought to you by Manscaped, who are the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Shaving your jewels doesn't have to be risky business anymore, thanks to the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. This trimmer is all about keeping things smooth and safe, so you can trim with confidence. Treat your boys down there and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com to get 20% off plus free shipping with code SERIA. With Manscaped, it's easy grooming, no surprises.
I mean, come on. At the same time, come on, let's not rewrite this as Allegri was great all the way to the end. The last part has been...
But who said
crap,
that?
I'm sorry.
Who said that? I no stage said that. What I was saying was, I resent the fact that his position is being constantly undermined. The club have provided him with no assurances. So either come out and be very frank and say Allegri is going to be leaving the club at the end of the season. We will find a resolution for the remaining 12 months on his contract. Or say Allegri is our coach until the end of this season. We want no more further speculation. We'll announce things in due course. Don't leave him high and dry. I was at no stage defending his record. His record has been poor. What I would say is, as devil's advocate, he will argue that the winning is the only thing that matters motto applies really to overall competitions and actually winning silverware as opposed to matches over the course of 90 minutes. And I would argue that once you've fallen away in the title race, which they did spectacularly, as I said, whether you finish 2nd or 5th, I don't think matters too much. Maybe it does if you want to look back and say, but ultimately, 2nd is the first loser. And I think Juventus would probably embrace that. What I think is, I think it's Juventus being very cynical, quite sneaky. They're trying to save on a year's wage by firing him for gross misconduct. And I think it's not really the way to. You could have easily said, you've embarrassed the club. How about we give you 30% of what you're owed, and we label this as mutual consent? People would have speculated as to whether it was, and I agree. You can't go out abusing people as he did with the Guido Vacciago, who apparently is the editor of Tuttosport. I've occasionally seen some videos of him on Twitter doing sort of thought pieces. But again, I would say that if you're being constantly criticized and then you see the person who's responsible for that criticism because their paper is, when emotions run high, as they do, then people occasionally make mistakes. I'm not saying his behavior should be condoned. I'm saying that we should give him a little bit of leeway on that. But yes, if he's going around abusing female delegates from Lega, then that, of course, is beyond the pale. So I think we need to definitely condemn that. But equally, I think you need to look at all of the context to it. And I think Allegri was sort of pushed right to the brink.
Just to come back as well on Sarri, because Sarri's he's had a lot to say in the last day or so. I'm trying to think of the event he was at. It was at an event where he basically spoke to journalists, and he's had some opinions, including this idea that, if the only thing that matters is winning, then does the Coppa Italia count enough? Which is kind of him getting his dig in, and that's pettiness.
But he hates the Coppa Italia as well, doesn't he? He always has done.
And pretty much every cup, to be honest with you. He seems to just generally treat a lot of cups as an inconvenience, doesn't he, Sally, that he has to put up with. But I did think, just seeing Sarri again, I think Mina touched on it just now, but I just think it's worth highlighting. Actually, Juventus do, rightly or wrongly, and a lot of people will roll their eyes and groan at the idea of it, but they do like to push this idea of the stile Juve, the Juventus style, the way we do things, which is proper. And for Sarri, the whole season he was there, it was, he wears a tracksuit. Always, you know, wear a tracksuit. Okay, he's found this sort of semi-formal way to be on the sideline, which is that acceptable? Is that enough in the stile Juve? And I think that Mina, again, she already touched on it with Allegri being company man. He's always been excelling at that. I just think in terms of a sort of perfect encapsulation of the beginning and end, what more could be the perfect visual for the end of him fully abandoning, literally ripping off the suit that perhaps is confining at a certain point, feeling like you have to wear the company suit. Well, F your company, I'm on the way out.
You know, you've watched Allegri become a Juventus fan, and it's become so deeply rooted within him. He was just a coach before, right? He was the coach of Milan. He arrived, he was never loved. He arrived on the first day and pelted with boos and criticism and tomatoes and told that, you know, where to go because Antonio Conte had just left, a real Juventus fan, and Allegri had arrived, much to the chagrin of everyone around him. And then he has built himself, right? And it's always been, but Conte laid the foundation. Like, no one's ever really loved Allegri, right? Except he really fell in love with the club. And I think you could see that. And I think that it's very hard to watch a coach sort of fall in love and then get treated like that. Just from a human point of view,
so
I think a lot of us
betrayed by the club, Mina, is that what
I
you're saying?
Absolutely do. And one of the reasons is that in 2017, this is all mentioned, right? In 2017, he was approached by PSG to take over. And I love Nicky just laughing. And he rejected that offer. He was then approached by Real Madrid. And Real Madrid has always been a club that he has wanted to eventually go to, and he rejected. He was approached again last season, just before Ancelotti arrived, and he signed the contract. But then Andrea Agnelli came. And this is where I have such an anger to a lot of these reporters who come out and talk about Juventus. You know nothing. You know that part. When you come and say, Allegri stole money, Allegri is just like doing it for the money. He never did it for the money. Real Madrid offered him so much more. He rejected that to come back to Juventus because that's how much this club meant to him. That's how much the whole project, Agnelli, everything meant to him. And so he did come back. He took less money, really, honestly, than what he was offered to take this job. And if you do say, if you know, fans of the club often go, this is Juventus. Well, if you want to be this is Juventus, then you also have to understand you have to pay money to get the best, you know? I love the fact that they all think they want to be a top club, but then want to pay 3 million for a coach. Then you're not Juventus. Then you're just a regular team, you know? So they paid whatever they did, 9 million for him. He's come in, he's done the best that he can. Now, when the board resigned, he came up to Elkan and said, would you like me to resign too, as a token, as somebody who has been employed by the former board? And Elkan said, I really need you to stay because we need somebody to tie over the old management to the new management. And so he did. Like, he has done everything from a point of view of I love Juventus and I'll do what's right. So I think it's rather awful, the way that he was in the end, sort of exactly what you said, Patrick, a case of we're trying to save money on his last year, so let's try to figure out a way of just chucking him out early and then saving money on this. To a coach who in particular has always shown a deep level of love for this club. And I think one of the few who has really gone out and defended. And every day he is Stefano Pioli as well with Ranić, right? Like, I find this horrendous journalism where every time that they sit down, they're asked whether or not they're going to keep their job. As well as Thiago Motta, are you going to? It really is awful, especially when you're the coach, that you understand that you're being pushed out. It's a horrible thing to do. I get asking, right? You can ask once a month, but every single 3 days, especially when they're involved in different competitions, I think is so disgusting, to be honest with you, from a journalistic point of view. You keep reminding the coach that he's on his way out. We get it. We do. Like, stop asking the question. And I just think in the end, he's just felt like Giuntoli has made it so clear he has absolutely no affection for Allegri. We understand that. We understand that this is now his team and he gets to decide what's going to happen moving forward. We understand that Allegri wasn't a good fit. We also understand that Allegri losing his mind is somebody who has been caged for so long and been professional for so long. And where did it get him? Where did it get him? So it's like, you know what? F you. This is going to be my time. I get to sit here next to the ultras and enjoy as I watch my boys lift a trophy. And I think that is a great ending for him. It would have been nice for him to just at least have finished the season. But it is what it is. And I think that he will go down a legend. I'm almost happy for him because I think he won back a lot of the Juventus fans in that sense as well, because it was just deep injustice. And you know what? If Zinedine Zidane had to go out with a headbutt, then I'm glad that Allegri went out with a striptease.
Just got a couple more points. I hate the whole stile Juve style argument, because to me it just reeks of hypocrisy. If the club were whiter than white, then fine. But this is a club with a checkered legacy throughout the years, and I won't go into any more detail than that. The facts are there for people to look into. So I don't think you can be all holier than thou and then expect people to stand up to certain standards. If time and again down the decades we've seen instances of foul play. With Allegri, I actually feel a little bit sorry for him, because I do think his star has waned. And what you were saying there about PSG and Real Madrid, that's all part of the past. And that was basically on the legacy of his first spell in charge. I think we need to judge him on the recent evidence, the same way we did with Mourinho at Roma and his previous jobs. And it reminded me a little bit of Mourinho sort of coming out belatedly and saying, I was offered the Portugal job, but I turned down my national team to coach Roma. It reminded me of Wenger every time there was a great player who became a global star.
No, Patrick,
I could have signed him. Do you know? I mean, no one cares. No one cares.
This is in response to him, people saying that he took the Juventus job for money. He took it back for money, or he was doing this to satisfy
I think he took it because he missed the boat, and that was the only opportunity that he had.
No, he had Madrid. That's why. That's what I mean. That's
when
exactly
did he have
what I
Real
mean.
Madrid?
He signed the contract with Madrid, cancelled the contract to go back to Juventus. It was the same year. Florentino Perez has talked about it in 2021. When he came back to Juventus that summer, he had already signed a contract. He had to call back Perez and say, I'm really
when his
sorry.
stock was very high.
It doesn't matter whether their stock is high. I'm replying solely about
because I would argue that
Patrick,
the first season he had at Real Madrid, he would have been fired mid-season, whereas Juventus actually allowed him to stay on for 3 years despite underperforming. So there's a big difference.
No, Patrick, I don't mean the last season. I'm talking about when he took back Juventus's job.
I understand that.
He hadn't had that, yeah? I'm replying to the criticism that he only took Juventus to satisfy his wallet. So there's a lot of criticism about him only having taken that job with Juventus because no one wanted him and because he wanted money. And my point to the response to that was actually he just signed a contract with Madrid. So it's not about judging him now. You're right to say that what happened thereafter has been terrible. But I'm saying at that point, he didn't take the Juventus job for money.
Yeah, and I'm saying as a cynic, he's an intelligent man. He will know that Real Madrid under Florentino Perez, coaches typically don't have huge job security, whereas he had a lot more credit in the bank at Juventus, where he'd had 5 years in the previous spell. And lest we forget, in his first year back with Juventus, newly promoted Monza got their first ever Serie A win against Juventus. They had drawn one game and lost their first 5. Giovanni Stroppa had been sacked. It was a rookie coach, Raffaele Palladino. They went to Turin and won as well. I don't want this to be misconstrued as me painting Allegri's 3 years in charge of Juventus second time around as being overwhelmingly successful. I think it's been a failure, but I think there are mitigating circumstances. What I would say is for him to make out that he's gone back to Juventus because of some sort of love for the club or honour, I'm sure that is part of it, but I don't think it's as black and white, if you'll excuse the pun, as that. I think that, yes, maybe he might have been offered more money in Spain, but then you have to go to Real Madrid, and you know that if you lose 2 of your first 5 matches, you might be out of a job. You have to learn the language. I'm not sure he made strides to do that. It's more comfortable. He knows
Patrick,
what he's doing.
I think that's I'm sorry, I'm going to have to defend him on this occasion, because I think with most coaches, if you have the chance of coaching Real Madrid, you have the chance of coaching top athletes at the top of their game, you have the opportunity to win trophies. Also, if you are that top level athlete or you're a top level coach, you always believe that you're the guy that's going to make a difference.
So why
you're going to have an ego.
Did he bottle it?
You're going to have no, because this is what I'm talking to you about Juventus means a lot. That's why I tell you he's become a Juventus fan. Juventus have come to mean so much to him. And there is this part of him that is very attached to Andrea Agnelli coming back and saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry for what happened in 2017 because of the fact that at the time he felt that he let down Allegri, and Allegri felt let down because in that Champions League final, he said, I didn't have anyone to play, whereas Madrid did, and you needed to listen to me. I wanted to buy midfielders. You didn't give me the midfielders. And he said, I'll let you have it this way. Whatever you want, I'm going to let you have it this time around. And he said, okay, then I'll come back. I think that's the difference, is that he has become a Juventus fan. Of course, there is all this, like he feels comfortable there. He knows that, of course, but I do think turning down Real Madrid, it's something that stays with you, like Totti in every interview, right? He always tells us he didn't go to Real Madrid. It's a big deal. And he's going to feel like he would have made the difference.
To compare Allegri with Totti, I think.
No, but you know what I mean. But at the end of the day, there is always this part of you as a top level coach that thinks you will make the difference. Perez twice has come in for you. You do think that you're going to win with, you don't think, oh, I'm probably going to get sacked, because you're not going to be a top level coach. I don't think so now. Because I think that what you've said is what happened afterwards is true. He didn't do very well. And so that is going to impact him. But I don't think that means he's out of any top level coaches. No, I do think he'll still make it back one day. I don't think it'll be Real Madrid, because I think now he's too old.
Head to SerieAchronicles.com/Patreon now and subscribe to the Chronicles Tifosi Patreon membership with a free 7-day trial. Get early access to every full-length episode and voice note before the rest of the world. Plus, all episodes are 100% ad-free. And you get bonus Patreon-only exclusive episodes, video episodes, and behind-the-scenes extras. Also, be sure to join the new chat community in the Patreon app and chat with fellow subscribers.
Maybe we've had too much of an argument on Allegri now. But either way, that has been one of the biggest stories in Italy. I think another big story has indeed been about Oak Tree and Inter. Inter celebrated the trophy. There were a lot of tears at San Siro. It was a beautiful choreography in the stadium. Congratulations again on another brilliant season. There's just been so many cool pictures and videos that we've watched. But there's been somewhat of a weird atmosphere, because as much as they were celebrating this, we also understand that there's a loan to be repaid to Oak Tree that Stephen Zhang had taken out. So we know that Inter had needed a lot of money. So he took out this loan and he had to pay a lot of interest, I think 12% at the time. It's working out to just under 400 million now that needed to be repaid yesterday. But there was a bank holiday in Switzerland, which meant he had an extra day, and it needs to be repaid today by 5 p.m. As we're talking now, it's 1 p.m. English time, 2 p.m. Italian time. It's highly unlikely that the loan will be repaid, which means that there's question marks as to who and what the ownership will look like at Inter after today. Now, Beppe Marotta has somewhat looked a little bit troubled. He's cancelled a few meetings last week and a few appearances on TV because he has to have to deal with this. From a purely practical or top-level point of view, we know that Marotta stays in place and not much will change. But of course, this situation is also very different to what we saw with Milan, where effectively the club was repossessed and under the management at the time of Elliott. We don't know if that's going to happen now. Nikki, I feel like you're trying.
Even the Marotta situation is even that. It's a short term, we know. So what we know is that Oak Tree already has representation on Inter's board. So Oak Tree have not been completely without this situation all the way through. But the majority shareholding, it's somewhere around 67%, has been held by Suning during this period. What differs in a big way between the situation at Milan and the situation now is Lee Yong-hong had taken out a full loan from Elliott management to buy Milan, and so they were able to just fully repossess the club because he didn't pay off the debt on his loan. Suning had control of Inter and then took out a loan subsequent to that to support costs. Like a lot of clubs, they were running up extra debts associated with the pandemic, and as Mina says, that's run up to just shy of 400 million euros now, with the interest added on. As Mina's already said, we are recording in the middle of the day. It's possible something dramatic will happen, but it seems extremely unlikely that Suning will come up and the Zhang family will come up with the money to pay off this debt. They had been trying. There was this whole negotiation with PIMCO where for a while it looked quite optimistic, but obviously that has not come through for various reasons. So the likelihood is they are going to default on this debt. But defaulting on this debt for all the reasons just said, does not mean they immediately lose ownership to Oak Tree. Oak Tree will have an opportunity to effectively themselves come up with the difference in what they're owed and the valuation of Inter's assets. And if they can come up with that amount, then they can force a purchase of Inter as a way of forcing Suning to pay their debts. It is a bit more complicated than the Elliott situation was, but it still looks probable that the outcome of this will be Oak Tree taking control of the club. And the other thing to say on that is what we don't know, because Oak Tree haven't given us public indication of it, is exactly what that would mean in the short to medium term. It's not expected that Oak Tree want to run a football club. But if you remember with Elliott did run Milan for a while until they found an appropriate buyer and then sold the club. So will there be an interim period now when Oak Tree control the club? How long would that be? Do they have a buyer lined up to come in and take the club off them right away? These are the questions we don't have answers to. And I think that in terms of Marotta specifically, I think probably every Inter fan wants Marotta to stay involved because he's done some very shrewd transfer business for them and to help the team stay extremely competitive during this period when they have sold assets during these transfer windows. And I think that in the short term, Oak Tree are not going to rock the boat. They'll absolutely leave him in charge. But if Oak Tree did have a new buyer, that's when the situation becomes more uncertain. If there's a new ownership coming in, they might have completely their own ideas about how they want to do things. And we have no idea right now who that potential third party could be. So there is a lot unknown in this story at the moment.
Huge amount.
Yeah. So it's a difficult one to cover in a really certain way, I suppose, because we don't know what's going to happen. We have an idea of the first things that are going to happen. We fully expect Suning to lose control of the club, but where we will be in a month, 6 months, a year, those are all difficult questions.
Yeah, there's an overall lack of transparency, I think, in the reporting, which is understandable because, you're not going to necessarily make the media party to all of the ins and outs of these complex financial operations. What I would say is I read a piece by very authoritative financial sports journalist Marco Bellinazzo, who works for Il Sole 24 Ore, which is an Italian finance newspaper. And he seemed to suggest that Oak Tree would have an interest in forcing a sale because then they would benefit from a percentage of the capital gains on said sale. So, I mean, there are a lot of conflicting reports. I've spoken to people close to the club as well who aren't exactly certain as to what's going to happen. The only thing I would question, just from a logical perspective, and I'll hold my hands up and say I'm a pure layman and beyond sort of paying my mortgage, I'm not particularly well versed in finance. But I don't really see what the incentive would be for Oak Tree to issue a loan to Suning in this case, and Suning putting up the club as collateral, if Suning are only going to put up X amount of shares as collateral as to the amount that they owed. Like, there doesn't seem to be any jeopardy there. If you default on the loan, then you only lose the corresponding amount of shares. To me, surely you would have to put up collateral, which would be superior to that. And this is the sort of risk-reward trade-off. But again, that's my supposition, and I'm clearly wrong on that because from the sounds of it, they'd only be entitled to the equivalent amount in shares, and then Suning would have to try and make sure that they would then seek a valuation, I think, which would come from a Oak Tree designates someone who would value the club at what they think is market value, and then they sort of go from there. But I think it's going to drag on, and as you said, it looks like it's going to be continuity on an operational level. They want to keep the same management in charge because this is the management that has seen Inter win 7 trophies under Steven Zhang. And I thought it was a nice banner from the Curva Nord saying, grazie, Steven. Thank you, Steven, for the 7 trophies they've won under Suning in 8 years. Yeah.
I do think it's interesting how combative Steven Zhang has still been, putting out a statement on the official website as well, which feels like a real way to do it. That's still there, at least it was when I last checked, on the website of this club that he may not own by the end of the day. Saying Oak Tree haven't tried to cooperate with us. I don't know. It's just the wording of it struck me as someone who hasn't given up yet. And I find that interesting because it doesn't really seem obvious how there's a way out for them now. Maybe that's not what it is. Maybe it is just a defiant final message. But it felt like he hasn't accepted this.
Why did he feel so slighted When you take out a loan, you know these are conditions. You know that's the interest rate, exorbitant, but of course it's going to be for market rates at the time, plus the amount that you're actually, and
considerable risk for the lender during a pandemic.
Completely. As we've seen, they're not in a position to be able to pay it back, hence all of those reasons. So to then come out and, be outraged at the fact that someone who has issued this loan to you then wants you to pay it back on time, to me I was quite taken aback by that. I was surprised, to be honest. But,
a lot of the financial analysts have said that they were quite surprised by Stephen Zhang, because what did you expect? In the sense that this is what happens when you're dealing with finance company. They take on the risk, but there is a reward. I mean, they will take the shares, but they do also take the governance, right? So then they will create their own board, and then they get to decide what happens. And that's effectively what Zhang has put in their hands. It's like this loan. They do get their share equivalent, but also the power. And I think that's quite hard for him to swallow at the moment, because from a human or point of view, he is young, right? He thinks to himself, we're good for it. We're gonna repay you. Just hold on. But it's not the right way to go about it, because that's not how things work in the finance world, right? You need to pay. More importantly, Oaktree have made it very, very clear that they have no interest in running a club, that they just simply want their money and they're out. Entirely different.
Football's always made people crazy, right? It made Moratti crazy. Moratti dumped like €1 billion worth of family holdings into the football club because he just loved it, and people make reckless financial decisions for football when they love it.
He's now just relinquished control, hasn't he? I think of Saras. He's no longer in charge, so that's at an end anyway.
It also goes to show you sort of some of the business financial decisions taken. The loan 12%, the amount of money. I mean, people are like, no, that's fine, but then you sort of look at the way that Real Madrid or City or others, maybe not City right now, but how
just an example
with 150 anyway. But the point is that when you look at, for example, like how teams who are well run, how they do preserve their money. Exactly. Atalanta, who've spent 40 million on their salary, on their entire squad salary. It really shows you how a well-run club can achieve so much. And on the whole, Inter have been very well run, at least from Beppe Marotta, at least from a sporting point of view. They're incredibly well run the way that they've spent money. But Stephen Zhang, ever since China had the issue with them having assets abroad, then it became a problem, unfortunately. And then they had to pivot and try to find different ways. But like you said, Patrick, he's won so much for Inter. The fans and a lot of the players have really bonded with him. He's a young president. There was a lot talked about him in the beginning where it's like, does he know what he's doing? But Inter succeeded under him. How much of that is down to Marotta? How much is that down to him? He's the one who chose the people who came to work at the club, right? He's the one who knew how to delegate impressively well, which is something that I'm not entirely sure that we've seen right now in the rest of Serie A. So,
I really liked his approach. He basically said he did what you do in industry. You look at best practice. Best practice at the time was Juventus. He said, who can we get from Juventus? We can get Beppe Marotta and we can get Antonio Conte. Right, then you can leave aside the fact that certain other signings failed, like Asamoah and Cuadrado this season. But in terms of the key positions, he went and got Antonio Conte, who was the one who established Juventus's 9-year winning run. And he went and got Beppe Marotta, who was recognised as the best sporting director in the Italian game, and gave him an even more significant role above the sporting director as CEO for sport. And I think if you get those important hires right, and we know that Marotta has clout within the Lega, we know he has great contacts. And aside from a few questionable deals, paying Alexis Sanchez to leave the club only to then re-sign him, buying Arnautovic for a big fee, that's not really worked out. But in the main, the bulk of the transfer deals have been very good, and especially when you look at Marcus Thuram on a free, all right, €8 million, I think, in agent fees and things, but he's now worth 10 times that much. I think that's what his release clause is. So that is the legacy
as well. They've accepted a need to sell and bring in. The financial side of things is Inter have reduced losses, I think, every year. It's just that they're still making losses. That's the problem. They have been working in a virtuous direction. It's just it's a long way to go.
Absolutely. There were so many losses. I mean, and more importantly, they've educated a fan base that has allowed them to be patient and to watch some of the biggest stars leave and not sort of freak out, if you like. I think that, as you're saying, they're working towards a virtuous path. Long may it continue, because I think we need some strong sides for next season. And we hope that Inter's not going to be destabilized by this. Do you think that means that Inter are not favourites for next year? Just a quick question.
I think they are still favourites. What I liked was the comparison that someone made as it's classic Pazza Inter. You know, they have this craziness within them that's inherent in the sense that 2010, the treble, and then on the night they win the Champions League, Mourinho's in tears, he's off to Real Madrid. 2021, they win the title under Antonio Conte for the first time in 11 years, and then suddenly they have to sell Lukaku and Hakimi because the club have got no money. 2024, they win the 20th Scudetto, the second star, and all of a sudden, the day that they're celebrating, all of the news overshadowing it is the fact that the president's about to be deposed because of this loan default. So, I mean, if they can keep the senior management together and keep the playing staff together, and crucially Simone Inzaghi, who's the architect of all this recent success, then yes, they start as overwhelming favourites for next season. If something changes and they have to make a key sale, Barella, Lautaro, someone like that, then we could see things change. But much will depend on who the hires are at Juventus and Milan, I think, as well.
Nikki, you agree, right?
Broadly, yeah. It's too soon to really know what's happening next season. I'm a huge Simone Inzaghi fan. We've talked about that loads. Who knows? I don't want to drag us back to a Juventus conversation, but we didn't actually mention the fact that in their game, some of the positive stuff was looking at Chiesa and Yildiz on the pitch together. Maybe a new manager comes in and sees that, they get Fagioli back and Juventus are more competitive again. All that stuff is guesswork. Maybe Antonio Conte will be in the league doing Antonio Conte things. There's lots of moving parts that we have no idea about. But do I think Inter will be very strong? As long as Simone Inzaghi is the manager and they don't sell the entire squad, then yeah, I think they'll be very strong.
Well, we spoke about some good management and Patrick brought up Atalanta. Atalanta, of course, have a Europa League final to contest tomorrow evening. That's Wednesday evening against I was going to say Olympiacos, but it's not. It's Bayer Leverkusen. Yes, they really do wish. It's Bayer Leverkusen who finished their season undefeated, an incredible feat managed by very few before it. And certainly not in the Bundesliga at least. So well done to them. Now, this could be their first potential loss when they take on Atalanta. Is it their first potential loss? I mean, listen, there's a lot, right? There's a lot to talk about in the sense that Atalanta, Coppa Italia, you guys were very firm on the fact that, there's always that potential with Juventus. I was very firm on the fact that Juventus looked dreadful and they'd be out, But as it was, they played one of their best matches in the last certainly 16 games, and lifted the trophy. But there are question marks on how Atalanta do really what they manage in actual finals. So this is going to be a tough one for them. They will be without De Roon. There's been some lovely fan support for the player. But obviously, Scamacca missing for a final was huge in the Coppa Italia. Scamacca will be there. He's one of their most important players. This is a Europa League final. You would have to say Leverkusen are the overwhelming favourites, but what percentage would you give to Atalanta potentially winning this, Nikki?
Percentages are hard. 25? That seems really high when you think you're talking about a team that hasn't lost all season.
I thought it was really low.
But think of our against the team they're playing has not lost all season. So how am I supposed to put a number on it? It's a farmers league,
though, isn't it?
Thank you, Patrick.
But I do think when we talk about absences,
please don't clip that up. That's me being
We're joking.
Clip it up. I think we talk about absences. I love Martin de Roon. He's one of the most entertaining social media presences of all of Serie A. In fact, I think on the podcast as well the other day I was saying probably doesn't get enough credit sometimes because we talk about other players. He's a good player, but if you're asking me which of the two I'd be more worried about missing between Scamacca and De Roon, right now it's Scamacca. So I think it's definitely going to be a stronger team that they can put into this final than they could in the Coppa Italia final. Just because goals decide football games and goals decide finals, and having the player who's been absolutely on fire for this last part of the season, of course, that's a big benefit to them. I don't know what new there is to say because we've talked about this Atalanta team so much, and I've talked about all the things I love about it. But in the end, the question is going to be, even if Atalanta are 2-0 up with 3 minutes on the clock, will Bayer Leverkusen not find a way to score 2 goals? Because they just do. They just find ways to score at the end of games.
Yeah,
Patrick?
I'm quite hoping for a compromise whereby let Bayer Leverkusen have their statistically unbeaten season and Atalanta can win the game on penalties or even after extra time. And that counts, so there is a way to satisfy all parties. They seem obsessed with this unbeaten season. And I'm hoping that might count against them, to be honest. And I think Atalanta are going to be hugely motivated. They didn't do themselves justice in the Coppa Italia final. They have an opportunity. I think if they were to choose which final they'd rather win, they would obviously select this one. Not that you can choose. And I think obviously Bayer Leverkusen a stronger opposition on paper than Juventus were. But I think they'll be afforded more space from what I can glean. By no means an expert on the Bundesliga, but I think because of the way Bayer Leverkusen have waltzed to the Bundesliga title, because they're playing, from all accounts, very adventurous attacking football, I think they're more likely to try and take the game to the opposition than Juventus were, who were quite keen to stifle Atalanta. So I think that could play into Atalanta's hands. The fact they play 11 man against a man all over the pitch. I think De Ketelaere was bullied by Danilo and Bremer, amongst others. So I would quite like to see Koopmeiners, De Ketelaere and Scamacca all playing together and seeing them interchange position. And I think that could cause problems. Guardiola said it as recently. He said, on their day, when they play this well, that was after the Roma game, Atalanta can beat anyone. And I really hope that they do themselves above all, but also the league justice tomorrow night, because I think it would be great for the neutrals to really get... And I'd like to think the Dubliners will be... They won't, will they? Because Xabi Alonso's ex-Liverpool. But I'd love to think that the Dubliners will be behind the Bergamaschi. I don't think they will, but I certainly will be. I will be cheering on Gasperini, and I hope he can do a striptease in celebration.
Gosh.
Would you like to see that?
Be still my heart. All these sexy men with the striptease. I'm joking.
It's got a fine head of hair for a 65-year-old man. Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
Wait, who's got a fine head of hair?
It's gas.
Some of the better hair in.
Oh, it was his striptease. I thought you talked about
pepper. Yeah.
Xabi Alonso. No, please let's not see the Gasperini striptease. let's maybe see Xabi Alonso doing a striptease. So what percentage did you settle on, Patrick?
40% Atalanta.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, you see, this is a difficult one, right? Because I sometimes look at the teams that they've played by Leverkusen, and I don't think that barring obviously that they've played some strong opposition in the Bundesliga. But when I look at the Europa League, I feel like Atalanta have played the harder matches. So I wonder if that works for them in the sense that, I don't know. I look at Bayer Leverkusen and I think West Ham, Karabag, not really huge opposition.
So nearly out against Karabag. That's the crazy thing. They were losing that tie.
If you can get Paredes to score 2 penalties against you, then I'm...
And hang on, isn't that technically on the Irish Sea with the sort of Mersey, the estuary going out to the Irish Sea, Dublin the other side? There's a body of water in between. Maybe there'll be some sort of sea air that will inspire them. I'm really clutching at straws here.
I think one of the things that's interesting about both teams is actually both teams can surprise you. I think that if we look back to the first leg between Bayer Leverkusen and Roma, there was that decision to start Florian Wirtz up front by Xabi Alonso that really felt like it caught everyone out. And let's be clear about this. Leverkusen were far better than Roma over 2 ties. I know Roma brought it back in the second leg with those penalties and made it look close, but they were the worst team. Bayer Leverkusen were distinctly the better team in that time. But I think the counterpoint to that, in terms of if you want some optimism, is, well, Roma played Atalanta right afterwards, and Atalanta were miles ahead of Roma. It was a game that finished 2-1 that could have been 5-1 and wouldn't have felt unrepresentative of the game. So I do think that this is a much closer tie than the Roma ones were. And I think that both teams...
You gave them 25%.
I mean, if you ask me just to look at the football teams and give you a verdict on what I think of the football teams, it would be higher. But this team has not lost all season.
So feel the pressure. Think of the pressure they'll be feeling to keep that up for one last match.
I don't know. You're right. I don't know if it works with you or against you. I can't decide on this,
We'll decide after the result, won't we, I think?
There's a lot there that resembles the winning mentality that we see from Real Madrid. But it's a hard one, right? Because I just think of Scamacca. I think so. Let's talk about so now we know that Atalanta have confirmed a Champions League place. So yay for them. We're also praying that they finish in 5th and then win the Europa League so that we have 6 teams.
Can I do one moment of conspiracy theory? I feel this is going to annoy Patrick, but I'm going to give my conspiracy theory.
Oh, here we go.
You do it. I'm all on board with annoying him. Let's go.
So contrary to what we actually thought previously, it appears that Italy can only get 6 Champions League spots if Atalanta finish 5th specifically and win the Europa League. That appears to be the case.
Not 6th?
That's not what I was told by the guy in the competitions department. This is the problem. They've had to issue a circular letter, UEFA. Giorgio Marchetti's come out, who's even an Italian native. He's having to make statements to the Italian media. It's been badly handled, and I just wanted to make this point. It's unprecedented. Yeah. It's a new Champions League format, and I don't think we've ever seen all of these various things before. But that's what I was told a month ago.
Yeah, no, we definitely had that on our end. And it's possible, who knows, that will even still turn out to be the case. But at the moment, it certainly appears that a lot of people think, including some people at UEFA, the UEFA themselves don't necessarily have all their ducks in a row, that it's, if Atalanta finish 5th or 6th, then Italy can get 6 Champions League spots.
But I don't think they can come 6th, can they now?
No, they can't now. But back then we could have, there wasn't, I wanted to know if they could finish outside the top 4 in general or had to be 5th.
Sure, but it's now moot, I think. So they're definitely 5th, aren't they? Or 4th, or 3rd. Yeah.
My conspiracy theory is that because now Atalanta's game against Fiorentina will happen after the rest of the season, if Atalanta know that they have got the Champions League spot through winning the Europa League,
they'll lose it.
Could there be a convenient biscotto at the end of the season that works out for Italian football as a whole? I'm just leaving that little...
I think the opposite. I think actually... Yeah, go on, Mina.
Well, because Fiorentina also need to finish below Torino to have 9 places. Right. So it's kind of like they both need to lose that to have 9 places.
Or
so my theory is this, basically. I think if Atalanta win the Europa League, they're in the Champions League. I think as seeds as well, even if the format changes, that's the way it used to be. I don't know how it now works with the 36 teams, but they're in the Europa League. I think they'll expend so much energy and party so much that they'll probably lose on the final day of the season, which for them is the penultimate match, because as you said, they still have to recover the game that was called off when Joe Barone died. That's the 2nd of June in Bergamo against Fiorentina, who themselves will have played their European final on the 29th of May. So they're going to be flagging. They might be celebrating as well. But I'm not sure, because there's this huge, and I alluded to it in the preview, I think we were talking about it off air with producer Simon. I alluded to the fact that there's a big rivalry between Atalanta and Roma fans, and that stems back to when they used to be twinned, the 2 fan bases, and then there was a rival ultra group within the Atalanta supporters who weren't on board with the Roma fans being twinned with the Atalanta fans. So they tried to oust them from the Curva Sud, the south stand of what was the Atleti Azzurri d'Italia back then. Still gave his stadium, but it had a different name. And then as a result, this Atalanta faction of the supporters stole a Roma banner, which was seen as like one of the worst things you can do in sort of ultra circles. So since then, it's about 40 years now, there's been pure animosity between Atalanta and Roma supporters. So I feel like that will be conveyed to the players. If there's a way of us stopping Roma from qualifying for the Champions League, let's do it. We're in it, whatever. So actually, let's make sure that we win our matches and come 3rd or 4th. And sorry, Roma, tough luck.
Conspiracy.
It's a long conspiracy theory, but I do feel that I don't buy into the theory that they'll be thinking, let's get as many Italian teams in the Champions League as possible. I think it's every man for himself. We're in, screw you.
That would be very disappointing if they do this. But I do think that maybe the Italian FA should just pay them money and say, lose this. But this is a joke, guys, before everyone gets carried away. But wouldn't that be funny? Because how good for them to have 6. But either way, there's also the whole Fiorentina who finishes in 8th, who do Torino make the Conference League at all. But anyway, just to quickly think, we can talk about this next week. But you guys think Fiorentina should be favourites for that, right? Or is it?
No, because it's in Greece.
It's in Athens.
You really think because it's Greece that Olympiacos could win this, right?
Massively, yeah. Home advantage counts for so much.
We shall discuss that next week.
Yes.
Not their stadium. Good point.
What we should probably discuss is the relegation battle. I mean, we've come into this podcast and I was so excited to discuss Juventus. And obviously we were so excited to discuss Inter. And the only thing Patrick has said is, can I discuss Udinese? So whatever. But we will discuss them because we need to discuss the relegation battle quickly.
Is that match finished? I wasn't sure if it was still going.
What
that match?
Yes, yeah. Because it went for like 120 minutes or something.
105th minute equaliser, yeah. Mm.
That's probably why you want to discuss it. So we know for sure that Sassuolo got demoted this weekend. Sadly, it's been a horrible season for them. Obviously, they lost Fratesi last season and they haven't had Domenico Berardi for much of it. So sad to see them go.
Grand Prix. He wasn't even at Mapei when they got relegated against Cagliari. He was at the Grand Prix in Imola. I mean, that's pretty poor form, to be honest. But there you go. Hobnobbing.
I mean, the Grand Prix is really sucking Serie A dry because Elkan's focused on Ferrari and no longer Juventus. Berardi is focused on races, no longer his team. Either way, Sassuolo have gone down, Salernitana have gone down, which means there's one place left to go, and that's going to be either Empoli, Udinese, or Frosinone. Now, Sky Sport calculate that Empoli have a 55% chance of getting relegated. So Frosinone stand on 35 points, Udinese are on 34, and Empoli on 33. So this is, we're going to have, if 18th and 17th are level on points, then there will be a two-legged playoff. Udinese and Frosinone face each other in the final round. So a draw for Frosinone is enough to ensure their survival. But Empoli need to either draw with Roma and hope Udinese lose, or beat Roma and leapfrog at least one of the other two. It's very complicated. Patrick, you have some thoughts on Udinese, who really barely got a draw in the end of that match.
I have some thoughts on Empoli. Empoli will definitely beat Roma. That's me going on the record. Empoli will definitely beat Roma at the Castellani. Roma are guaranteed to finish in the position they're in. They're ahead of Lazio on head-to-head. They can't be caught by Lazio. They can't catch anyone ahead of them. And then cynics will tell you that Roma signed Tommaso Baldanzi in January from Empoli as well. So I don't know if there's any sort of...
Oh my God, there's even more conspiracy theories.
Cynics will tell you that. I think it's completely unrelated. I just think Roma are away from home. Empoli are at home. I can see Empoli winning that match. I think the crucial game will be at the Stirpe between Frosinone and Udinese. And Udinese are lucky, really lucky, that they got a 105th minute penalty. I mean, it was a clear foul, but I think we played 98 minutes by the time that the incident took place. It's the longest VAR I can remember. Don't quote me on that, but it felt like it was about 6 minutes. And basically, Biol missed from a yard out, and then Pajero was trying to follow up on the rebound. His shirt was pulled by Fazzini, another of the Empoli youth team graduates. And Lazar Samacic stepped up, and amazing to think that he wasn't even supposed to be at the club because he was pictured, I think, even with an Inter scarf last summer. That move fell through at the 11th hour. So credit to him for stepping up. It was a really good penalty as well, because if you think otherwise, Empoli have 33 points. Had they won that game, then they'd be on 35 and Udinese would be on 33. The shoe would be completely on the other foot. So that's been really painful to Empoli, but I think they're going to chat, and there's been a lot of barbs between the different ownerships. Fabrizio Corsi, the Empoli president, came out and made a statement, and there was a response from the Udinese hierarchy. But I think Empoli are going to channel that frustration at what they feel was the game should have ended by the stage that the penalty was awarded, in order to then go on and beat Roma. So I really couldn't tell you who's going to get the result out of Frosinone and Udinese. Obviously, Frosinone know that if they avoid defeat, they're safe. But I'd love it if there was an early goal at the Castellani for Empoli. That news filters through to Frosinone, and then they and Empoli have to really go for it. At least Udinese have to go for it, and then you have to see whether Frosinone can actually defend. Our hunch would be no, because it's an Eusebio Di Francesco team. But I think it's all going to come down to that game. One of Frosinone and Udinese could be relegated. But I take your point. On paper, Empoli have it all to do because they're the team actually in the relegation zone, and on paper they play Roma.
Nikki, who do you think's going down?
I I'd love it to be another playoff because they're dramatic.
Me too.
I mean, they're awful, but they're dramatic.
So we can extend the season even further than the 2nd of July.
That's true, yeah.
No, please no. In that case, I'm not sure I want this to happen.
Yeah, I understand where Patrick's coming from, but I also just, Empoli, the fact that they needed until the 113th minute, whatever it was, to score, just feels emblematic of the problem they've had all season. They're a better team than their position suggests. They've played some actually really quite competitive football at times, but they have all sorts of trouble sticking the ball in the net. And if they can't stick the ball in the net this weekend, that could be the end of it. So I think that I really don't know, but I think I might still expect them to go down. I do think we've slightly, in the conversation of saying who's already gone down, we slightly buried the lead as well about who stayed up, which is Cagliari and Claudio Ranieri.
That's
And
because
Verona.
we wanted you to have the options of speaking about this.
I'm just forcing my way to talk about it. I wrote about it in my Guardian column. People haven't already read it. But I just think it's such an extraordinary story. And I obviously, Ranieri has done so much in his career. He's been all over Europe. He's been at every big club in Italy. And forever, I think, for most of your if you're not a supporter of a team that he managed, probably most people will forever just think of Leicester, because that was the biggest thing he did. Winning a league title with Leicester was extraordinary. But it's just really romantically lovely to see him back at Cagliari, where it wasn't his first job in management, but it was basically the club where he launched himself, because he took Cagliari from having previously only coached in the lower leagues. He took them from Serie C1 up to Serie A from 1988 onwards, and did that in 2 seasons for consecutive promotions, having taken them over after they'd almost been relegated the year before, kept them in Serie A, then went off and became this incredible manager who got to manage all over Europe, comes back middle of last season when they're 12th, gets them promoted in the most incredible fashion with comeback in the playoff semi-final and in the final. And then this season, after 24 games, they'd lost, I might be getting my numbers wrong, it was something like 24 games, they lost 14 of them. I think it was 24 games, they lost 14 of them. They're headed for relegation again. Comes into the dressing room and says, should I resign, guys? Do you still want to be with me? Am I the problem? And the players say, no, we're all together on this. We're working hard. We can turn it around. And lo and behold, they have. In the next 13 games, only 3 losses. They get this win against Sassuolo at the weekend that crowns it. Incredibly, if you want to go back to that first stint in 1991, they secured their top flight safety that time around by beating Bologna, which is just up the road from the Mapei Stadium, on exactly the same day, 19th of May. So it's exactly 1991 to 2024, exactly 33 years. Can I do maths in my head? I should know that one. And exactly the same places. He's absolutely, and I think to understand this as well, you have to slightly understand Sardinia, which is, it's Italy, but it's not Italy. If you know what I mean. I know you know, but for anyone listening who hasn't been there, it is its own island. It sometimes feels like its own nation, even though it's attached to Italy. And I think that there really is this sense of him just having become, even though he is a Roman and supports Roma and has his whole history there, he's become a national hero. National in quotes to the people of Sardinia. He's become a true hero of their island, and the reception the team got coming back was magnificent.
Can I make a case for Verona, please, and Marco Baroni, who's done a better job than Claudio Ranieri? He has, because
Patrick is so competitive. He's like, no, this one's better.
Today is one-upmanship day, I'm telling you. Sorry, Nikki. But, Marco Baroni, but for Simone Inzaghi, he's coach of the year. This is a Verona side that completely riddled with financial difficulties. The club was basically seized from what's emerged, basically, and they were told to sell all their best players in January. Cyril Ngonge went to Napoli, Isak Hien went to Atalanta, Terracciano went to Milan. These are the big clubs picking off these players. All right, Fiorentina signed Faraoni, Doig went to Sassuolo. That's turned out to be a bad move for him. He's dropped out of the division. And then, they just cobbled together a load of signings again from sort of Northern Europe in January. They recruit very well from the Netherlands in particular. Sean Soliano, who's the returning sporting director. And they're safe with a game to spare And I like what Nikki was saying there about the symmetry, because not quite the same, but in 2011, Verona, who were under Andrea Mandolini at the time, they actually won a two-legged playoff against Salernitana to get out of the third tier to get back in Serie B after 4 years away. This time they won in Salerno to avoid going back down to the second tier. And I just think it's been the most amazing job. He's not moaned. He's conducted himself with dignity. They actually play quite nice football, and they keep unearthing these stars. The latest one is Tijani Noslin, who ironically had his worst game yesterday, should have scored a hat-trick and didn't end up scoring at all. But they've borrowed well. Foloruncio is outstanding. I fully expect him to start for Napoli. He should be starting. If he were at Napoli now, I think he'd walk into that midfield at the moment. I'm just hugely impressed with them. And I like players like Darko Lazovic that actually stayed around when all the other senior players bolted, So I think Ranieri's achievement, excellent. But this Cagliari side didn't see half of their first team sold off in January, whereas Verona did. And despite that, they've actually taken more points in the second half of the season than they did in the first half of the season. And I just think Barodi should be coaching somewhere better than Verona, with the greatest of respect to them.
Well, I think he should take Genoa, and Gilardino should take Bologna. But anyway, this was just my idea, but I agree with you. And he left Lecce at the time because it was a miracle that he kept them up last season, to be honest with you. And he's done such a terrific job, because there's no way that I thought Verona. I mean, to the extent of the signs, what the protests of the fans at the time who held up signs that said this is a car boot sale, this is so awful what's happening to us, and then look where they are now. So congratulations to them. I do just want to come back to one thing, just because Udinese Empoli, it was Empoli who scored first and Udinese who equalized at the end. Just wanted to make that clear. So it was Udinese who needed 990 plus 13 minutes to, what is that, 133? Yes, to score.
Just breaking, someone sent me a thread on Twitter, or X as we must now call it, from Dale Johnson, who's pretty good on sort of all matters VAR in European places. So there was some duff information coming out of UEFA last week. So to clarify the situation for Serie A this season, if Fiorentina win the Conference League and finish 8th or lower, then Serie A will have 9 teams in Europe. This goes against traditional logic. If it effectively means that the team which finishes 9th in Serie A, likely to be Napoli or Torino, can benefit from another team winning European trophy and finishing in 8th. This never used to be possible before the European performance spot was introduced. This is the new logic. Italy originally has 7 places, 4 Champions League, 2 UEL, and 1 Conference League. Fiorentina finish 8th and win the Conference League. They qualify for the Europa League through this, which gives Italy 2 + 1 in the Europa League. That's 8 teams in Europe. 1 to 4 Champions League, 5 to 6 Europa League, 7th Conference League, 8th Fiorentina, Europa League title holders. Under the new logic, the EPS, extra Champions League place, is applied last after Fiorentina have taken their place as title holders. In effect, the EPS forces the Conference League place to jump over Fiorentina and into 9th. 1 to 4 Champions League, 5 Champions League EPS, 6 Europa League, 7 Europa League, 8 Fiorentina, Europa League, title holders, 9th Conference League. The logic is that the Conference League place passes to the next team that is eligible for a place in Europe, and Fiorentina are already qualified. However, if Fiorentina were to finish 7th in the natural Conference League place, then Italy would surrender that place and have no team in the Conference League. To add to the confusion, if Atalanta win the Europa League, Italy has 6 teams in the Champions League. 1 to 4 Champions League, 5 Atalanta Champions League title holders. However, Serie A would surrender the place in the UEL earned by Atalanta, as they qualified for a European position before the EPS was applied. Clear. This is the last one in the tweet. I apologize for this long thread. What it really means is that a team can now benefit from the success in Europe of another, which was never previously the case. The EPS is a league reward. The reason 9th will qualify for Europe is because Fiorentina won the Conference League and finished 8th. I'm more confused now than I've ever been.
First of all, just
that makes sense.
Dale is really good on this stuff, and
yes.
And I would absolutely trust that. But it seems to suggest then that actually it doesn't matter where Atalanta finish. If Atalanta win the Europa League, there will be 6 Champions League spots, because what Dale writes is that Italy will lose a Europa League spot if Atalanta win that. So they would get 6 Champions League spots, so they would lose 1 Europa League spot.
That was the first
Which means
thing
my
that
source
UEFA
at the
ever said.
competitions department might actually be right after all that. He's gone very quiet on LinkedIn in the meantime, I have to say.
So the first thing that we ever heard when this was first came out at the very beginning in around November, December, I had understood it at the time that whatever extra position that we would gain in the Champions League, we would lose in the Europa League. It's also important to note that Fiorentina are on 54 points. So even if they do win their two in hand, one of which is against Atalanta, they would go to 60, which is level on points with Lazio. Does anyone remember so it's unlikely that they will finish in seventh. So it's eighth onwards for sure, which means that it's between Torino and Napoli going down to the wire of the final game.
Torino play Atalanta next as well, incidentally.
So I'm interested to know who's going to finish ninth, but we definitely know that Fiorentina is unlikely to finish in seventh. So do you guys remember the head-to-head between them and Fiorentina? I don't know whether
between who? Fiorentina and Lazio,
because if Fiorentina are to win their next two, then they would be level on points with.
Well, but Lazio's last game is against Sassuolo, who just got relegated. So Lazio probably.
It's unlikely that Lazio also don't win a single game, right? So we're looking at very high odds of
they need 1 point. They need to draw it. So yeah,
it's almost impossible that Lazio don't finish it.
And that game's in Rome as well, isn't it? So yeah.
So we're talking about Fiorentina almost certainly 99.9% finishing eighth onwards. So we definitely look like there's a ninth place for Italy. Now it would have been really lovely if somehow we can win all these competitions and then secure a 10th place, but that's just dreaming.
But does that happen? Because he didn't seem to say that there was scope for 10 teams, did he? He didn't say if Atalanta and Fiorentina win, there could be 10. So I think a place is surrendered.
Effectively, it doesn't increase the number of spots. It just upgrades one of them from Europa to Champions League. Yeah.
So exactly.
So he could have written all that in one tweet.
So are we saying that Atalanta don't need to finish in the top five now?
I think let's just hope Atalanta win the Europa League, and then I think Roma will be on the phone to UEFA and saying, "Are we in the Champions League or not?" That's basically what's going to happen.
Well, Roma need to worry about getting overtaken by Lazio still. So let's.
They can't because they've got their head-to-head.
The head-to-head. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Of course.
Because of Gianluca Mancini.
Yes.
Which is a shame for Lazio, who've done so well now under Tudor. But I'm excited to see what's going to happen next season, especially now that they've confirmed, Immobile has confirmed that he sees no reason to leave. So either way, I think that we've spoken enough on this pod. Just to let you know that producer Simon has just written, "Oh no," on the potential of Lazio next season.
That brings to a close another episode of Serie A Chronicles, wonderfully hosted by Mina Rizuki, and we had Nikki Bandini and myself, Patrick Kendrick, as ever on the pod. We will be back with some reaction to Atalanta's glorious Europa League victory in Dublin, fingers crossed, and Mina will also be giving you a deep dive on all things Bianconeri. Until next time, bye-bye.
Social Podcast Network.